Hello everyone, welcome back. I hope you are ready to continue. In part 1, we built the POS panel and configured all the supporting logic for vendor details. We also saw vendor lookup and item lookup, and finally we covered vendor selection and item selection. In part 2, we will complete the workflow including item quantity modification, adding additional payment details for the PO, and fetching the vendor email or vendor details from the head office using web services. Lastly, we will see the creation of purchase order, which means posting the PO along with printing the confirmation receipt. At this point, the user has already selected the vendor and added the products into the purchase order card. Let's select one product and change the quantity using the quantity command provided here. The system will prompt you to enter the quantity you want to adjust. You can update it accordingly and confirm. Now let's quickly jump into the command we created for quantity updates in purchase orders. Let me open Visual Studio Code. Here you can see the command tr quantity, which is linked to the panel. Let me open that. The system fetches details like the last selected line and provides the default quantity that is already selected. It opens a numeric keypad with the current quantity pre-filled. Once the user inputs the new quantity, we handle the response using the onNumpad result event. As you can see, we can capture the response and update the POS PO line table. This is how we implemented the quantity update for the purchase order. Now let's move on to payment. Some vendors operate FOB, free on board terms, meaning the retailer is responsible for delivery. To handle this, we added a button that inserts courier charges into the purchase order. This charge will use a GL account to process it as part of the purchase order. In our example, we are adding a flat charge of 50 as a courier fee. However, you can make this dynamic. For example, you can use a numpad to allow the user to enter the amount, then store it in the expense line. Let's see how it works. The system asks for confirmation that a courier charge of 50 will be added. Click yes. Now the courier payment is added. We have now seen both quantity change and payment addition. Let me show how we implemented this in code. This is the command tr payment. It asks for confirmation to add the charge. Then it checks the income expense account configured for PO charges. It uses that GL account and inserts a line into the POS PO line table with a value of 50. Now let's move on to the next command, get vendor email. Sometimes vendor emails stored locally may be outdated. In SaaS environments, POS usually has updated data. But in hybrid architectures, we may need to fetch updated data from the head office using web services. Let's see how we fetch the updated vendor email from the head office and display it on the POS panel. We created a custom command called tr vendor email. This command uses a SOAP service to retrieve the email in real time. To make this work, we enable SOAP services and configure a web request with request and response structures. We created a new code unit, get vendor email, modeled from the standard get customer code unit. Use this to send and receive requests to the web service. It determines whether the request is local or part of a distributed hybrid architecture. Once configured, we can fetch the latest vendor email and update it on the POS panel. Now let's review the required configurations. First, we expose the web service. Go to the web service page, search and open it. Here we publish our code unit get vendor email. Once published, we can check the request and response structure using WSDL. This helps identify input and output parameters. Next, we configure Web Request 2.0. We create a web request configuration for our service. This is similar to predefined LS web services. We configure the get vendor email service. The configuration file is provided in the course for ease import. Let me show the request XML. The request includes vendor number and expects email as a response. The response contains response code, result, error text, and vendor email. Once configured, POS can call the head office web service and fetch updated data. We also need to ensure the distribution server is configured. For example, in the POS profile, we define the head office connection. This allows POS to communicate with the head office. Let's compare the POS data and head office data. In POS, the vendor email might be outdated. For example, vendor 30,000 has one email in POS, but in the head office, the same vendor has a different email. Now click Get Vendor Email. You can see the updated email is fetched from the head office. Now let's look at the code. We pass the vendor number to the web request. The system calls the get vendor email code unit. It processes the request and retrieves data from the web service. We set the vendor number in a global variable, then we run the code unit. The response returns the vendor email. We assign the email to a global variable, then we retrieve it using a response function. At the top, you can see the vendor number assigned. The code unit fetches the vendor from the head office, then it sets the email value. Finally, the response is returned to POS. If there is an error, it returns an error response. Now let's move to the final topic, posting the purchase order. We have completed all steps: vendor selection, item selection, quantity update, payment addition, and fetching vendor email. Now we will post the order. We created a custom command tr post. Let's see what happens in the code. We create a purchase header and purchase lines. We transfer data from POS staging tables to actual purchase order tables. If a line is a charge line, we create a GL account line. After creating the purchase order, we print it. We use a function to print the purchase order. We define labels such as vendor info, email, item, quantity, and charges. We design a custom PO slip. First, we print the vendor information, then item details, then charge details. Finally, we close the printer. Now let's test it. Click post. You see a message, purchase order created and printed successfully. Now check the print. You can see the printed receipt with vendor info, email, items, and charges. After verification, you can confirm the PO. Congratulations, you have completed the end-to-end implementation of purchase order creation in LS Central POS. So let's recap what we learned. We learned how to design custom POS panels. We implemented vendor lookup, item lookup, record modification. We added additional charges like payment lines. We also implemented synchronization between POS and head office using web services. Finally, we posted the purchase order and printed the POS receipt. You can use this model as a template for other workflows such as returns, transfers, or service orders. That's a wrap. You have now built a fully functional purchase order module in the POS interface. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to seeing you apply these concepts in your implementations. Happy coding and happy customization. Thank you.